is called dispatcher solid, and dispatcher solid will act as your front controller, right? And so you can see here dispatcher solid is the heart of your Spring MVC application. So if you want to really start the Spring framework, the Spring framework will be the MVC will start with the dispatcher solid only, right? So, and as I said, so this is a built-in servlet which will be comes along with the MVC module. So we have to configure dispatcher servlet in the Web Dot Xml file, because so we want to start this servlet the moment when you are deploying the application. So we want to start this servlet, so it should be configured part of Web Dot Xml file. And from there, the dispatcher servlet internally uses a assistant manager called handler mapping, right? Handler mapping will be registered with all the list of handlers required for your projects. Like suppose if you are calling various URLs and all the URLs are being registered. Okay, all that. Okay, so all the URLs will be registered in a handler mapping. So via handler mapping only your dispatcher servlets so will delegates for sorry, yeah, I was on mute. Okay, so that's what. So once if it is identified from the handler mapping, then it will delegates to other components, right? So how this can happen, maybe we can see one example so that you will really come to know how we can configure, then how this is really going to delegate, how handler mapping will comes into the picture. So but we cannot physically see that the handler mapping, so this is all a background implementation. So background, it will really scan your components and then it will delegates. Okay. So first what we will do, as we are learning from since from the first application, so we are learning both XML version as well as annotations. First let us see a simple MVC application without any annotations, which is nothing but with XML version of the MVC application we will see. Then what will be the real change from XML version to annotation, even that also we will try to figure out the difference between the developing of MVC application using XML versus the MVC application with annotations. Okay, so the first application if you want to develop, as I said, so you need to register the dispatcher servlet in Web Dot Xml file, because so this is the place where your servlet is this is the place where your Spring framework will bootstrap. Your Spring framework with the help of dispatcher servlet. So that is what usually we will mention the load on startup elements. I hope everybody knows what is the importance of the load on startup. Load on startup is the element which will be used to start the servlets the moment when your application is deploying. So if you are not mentioned a load on startup, so what will happen? The servlets will wait until to get the request from the client. So I don't want to wait the Spring framework without bootstrapping until the first request. So that's what, so we will be mentioning the load on startup is one, so that along with your deployment of your application, make sure that the entire Spring framework is get ready along with your dispatcher servlet as well. Okay, so you can define here the URL pattern whatever you want, but try to mention in a generic format, because all the requests will be delegated to dispatcher servlet. So try to mention like star. Star means every request will goes to dispatcher servlet. And then how do you write your own servlet? Simply write a class, normal Java class, simple Java class, implements a built-in controller called controller interface. The controller interface has the method called handle request. override handle request method here, which carries these two parameters. One is request parameter, second one is response, and finally this will return you a object called model and view object. If you recollect the knowledge in servlet programming, or if you already developed a bank application, you know the real pain point of the returning a response back. You need to use request to dispatcher mechanism, and in that request dispatcher mechanism you need to mention the JSP. But how do you transfer the data? You don't have a generic class which supports for transferring both model as well as view. But when it comes to the MVC, they have specially designed a class which will carries over both model class as well as view. So that is model and view class. If you return, so it will return whole model and view back into the client. Okay, that is how you can write a simply your controller class. Think that is the pretty much of your controller. Whenever if you are writing any controller, so that is the very simplest way to write. But if you see here, what is the view which we are going to use? Welcome.jsp. In a welcome.jsp, which I would like to display in a message called welcome to Spring MVC is the message which I want to display. Okay, how does this JSP will retrieves this message? Okay, how does this JSP has this? Because model and view object dot add object, if you are adding, which indicates you are internally adding this objects, your HTTP request object. The whole request object will be transferred back to the client, right? So this will be visible to your clients, and then so client can read the data from the request dot get object, then so they can get this message, right? So okay, here is the JSP page, how it is looks like. So your JSP simply in the latest version of the JSP, it supports the concept of JSTL expressions. So here is the expression we have used to retrieve that message, okay, in the JSP page. If you want, you can also write a regular JSP standard elements also you can use, okay. Maybe your scriptlet you can use, or you can use expression. So any tag you can use even for to display that message, or if you want to use the latest syntax, you can still use that syntax also for displaying this message, okay. And coming to the servlet, so the controller, you have written a controller, but you need to register this controller, right? You need to register this controller with some URL, because ultimately this controller is going to be delegated by dispatcher servlet. So when if it is delegating, so it should register with some URL, but where you registered that, so we will be registering as a bean this hello world controller in the Spring configuration file. So if you see bean, so instead of using ID, we will use the name, because as this is a URL, so we will use the name, and then so we'll define some URL for this controller. So whenever a client is requesting with this welcome.htm, and I want to invoke a control called welcome controller, and this will be automatically scanned by handler mapping, and it will store in the handler mapping space. So whenever the delegate, so before it is delegating any request from dispatcher servlet now it contacts, does anybody registered with welcome.htm? Yes. So who is that? Is your welcome controller is a class, right? Let us develop this application. Let's look at practically how we can build this application. Any questions so before we start on? Any doubts, any questions so far? The same thing as it is, I'll try to develop and then show you in terms of practically. Okay, I'm launching STS. Let us see. Okay, so question is from Mr. Pramod. The question is, how Spring configuration is called? Very good question. Very good question. I'm expecting some people to ask this. So good. So you ask. Okay. So basically, how Spring configuration file is read. So where you are mentioned. So you have not mentioned anywhere like how do you load Spring configuration file. So where we load that Spring configuration is called, right? So as I said, the dispatcher servlet is the entry point for to bootstrap. So the dispatcher servlet is a capable event for to load your Spring configuration file. So what I'll do, I will pass a init param to dispatcher servlet by mentioning load the Spring configuration file along with the dispatcher servlet bootstrap. So what it will do, before the dispatcher servlet object is going to be bootstrapping everything, first it will load the Spring configuration file, then it will read all the, then it will register everything along with your dispatcher servlet. So that is the way you can avoid, so using bean factory, right? You can use the application context. So in the case of standalone application development, what we are really using, we are using either bean factory, or so we are using application context for to register or to configure Spring configuration file. Here the dispatcher servlet is the responsible for to do that activities. So you don't need to write any extra lines of the code. But I'll try to show you how we can add a init param to pass the Spring configuration file. Does it answer your question, Pramod? Okay. So next question from Prashanti. So it's not a single line. Okay, what is the first line? So do we eliminate using JSP by using servlets, or we append the Spring framework to the JSP? I didn't really get your question, Prashanti. Maybe you can unmute, still you can ask your question. No problem, okay? So use your voice and then so speak about. Okay, I didn't get your question, so if you can frame everything into a single line, at least you send it. It is useful for me to read out. Okay, your speaker is not working. Yeah, maybe you can write in single line. Okay, ultimately, see, one thing for just to add, if I understand your question partially. So usually you cannot avoid servlets, you cannot avoid the JSPs, because they are the I would say that base technology for to develop your web application. Okay, so anything the fundamentally which is given, which you cannot change or which you cannot replace, because internally somehow here and there definitely that concept will be used. So here also, even though we are in Spring framework, Spring MVC, they cannot change the servlets, right? Because ultimately only the server to client communication can be only happen via servlets or JSP. There is no other technology given for to communicate, so client and server, right? In terms of Java, you should use the servlets for to communicate that. So mostly we will use the servlets only, not in JSPs. JSP only for design purpose. So this cannot be changed, but what we are really going to achieve is we are trying to simplifying our development. Instead of writing a multiple servlet, so one servlet can be achieved everything. and then so we are simplifying our coding, so we are returning a model and view object. So that's what all those things can be achieved. Okay. All right. So similarly, even if you are aware of it, in JDBC, the JDBC is the only technology which is used to communicate your database server, right? You don't have any other alternative approach, but people are saying that so that you can still use Hibernate, but Hibernate again internally uses the JDBC only. Without JDBC, even Hibernate cannot communicate to your database. So again, so that is the base technology given by Sun Microsystem, cannot even replace by Hibernate or any other frameworks. So it has somehow internally it has to use in somewhere to communicate your database. So similarly here also, even though we are in Spring world, but still if you want to communicate a client and server, you absolutely require servlets. Maybe we can avoid a JSPs, but servlets are compulsory.
Srinivas, hello.
Yes.
Actually, for any application, people are creating GSTL. Any alternative for that? Means they are creating their custom GSTL and then implementing it.
There are many,
So do you
right?
have any?
So people are nowadays even completely they are avoiding the JSPs itself. They are using the HTML and Angular, right? So people are using something called EXTJS, extension JS, and some people are using the concept called Node.js, React.js. Some people are using Backbone.js. So for
Right,
to build a full stack developer.
right.
Okay, so there are a lot of UI technologies or frameworks are available in the market for to build the uh, uh, so UI. So you don't need to even depend the JSPs.
So means like how we are giving call to servlet from GSP. Similar way we can do that, right?
Basically,
We are
there see whatever I said UI related frameworks. If you go to Angular or extension JS, if you go to Bootstrap or so Node or React, if you go to all other different JS frameworks, so they relies on Ajax calls, they relies on REST service. Either it should be Ajax call, either it should be an A. So REST calls. If it is a REST calls, right? So you don't need any so JSPs. So simply what you need is only they have to call the service. So the service will send the response in appropriate JSON format or an XML format or HTML format, and your client should be able to observe, and then it should render on your browser. So right?
because one project I have seen there they are using JSP as well as Bootstrap
Okay.
and Struts framework is there
You can use
where they
you
do
can use
servlet as well.
you
But how
can
they are
you
aligned
can use.
actually I have not got it.
Yeah, you can still, if you don't want to use any other frameworks from outside frameworks, you can even use the JSPs. So we will be using mostly JSTL expressions only. Okay, so because that is more advanced, so we will be using more JSPs only here.
Srinivas, can you give me like little overview means like how to write a custom JSTL or something which use the defined
Yeah,
JSTL?
we will be using
Just
couple of expressions part of our examples. You can notice them.
okay,
You can definitely see those examples.
okay.
Okay, I'm just cleaning up to resolve some errors here. Some errors are coming up. Let me see what errors are belongs to. Usually I don't like to see any errors in the project, so it is always best practice don't to keep any errors in the application. Try to resolve, okay, all the errors, make sure. So I'm hoping everybody is practicing, because if you're not practicing, there is no use. Still, you will feel that you know everything, but once it is started, and you cannot even continue the next steps. So would be recommended to people, please go ahead and then practice more than what I am giving an explanation. So you have enough documentation, so materials are there. So in the Google, so there are a lot of information which you can browse. So utilize that, and then so build the application. So start practicing it and build your own applications. Come on, why it is taking so much time? Okay, done. So no errors. So now I will build the MVC application. First let us work with Maven only. So I don't want to go with the normal approach because Maven will resolve all our issues. So let's go to Maven project. So Maven based web applications which we are building. So I'll select the Maven archetype as web app archetype. So chosen as web app and click on next. And mention so whatever the project artifact name that you want. So let us use our series 023 underscore Spring MVC module. So this is our first application, Spring MVC underscore. I will write so come on. So first XML web project. Okay, some name, so you can give any other names. So the package, let us use as it is, our com.easylearn is our regular package. Let us use the same thing. So and click on finish it. So it should build the web project. Okay, it should generate all your web related sources and everything will be generated automatically. Web INF, Web Dot Xml file, everything is there. Okay, so let us configure the server in the build path. So let's go to configure, and in the build path I'll change my JDK 1.5 to JDK 1.8. use an alternative JRE 1.8. Let us add the server libraries also, add library. So attach the server runtime. Okay, choose Apache Tomcat 7.0. Any version can be used, and then apply it. So all the errors are gone. Okay, so now let us add Spring specific configuration files. So what I usually require is our Spring basic core libraries are compulsory. As I said, without core you cannot work on MVC, right? So core libraries are compulsory. Let us try to use the core libraries. I'll try to copy paste of all these libraries, and then on top of this, so you should also add MVC specific libraries, right? Because as you are working on MVC libraries are required. Let us add MVC libraries as well. Okay. Now if you see here, so your packaging is selected as a var. The package is selecting as a var. So the final build name is this. So you can change. So whenever you don't want this name, you want to change some other name, you can always change your package name. So now let us browse. Okay. So I'll go to open the browser. And I'll search with the name of Maven repository. Internet is.
See, what is the artifact ID that you have selected while creating a Maven project?
What is the Maven? Artifact ID? Okay. Artifact ID is your project name. The name of your project is nothing but your artifact ID.
So while creating Maven project, that time? Web app project or quick start?
Which one?
While creating a project, you have selected web
Okay.
app or quick start.
I
While
didn't get
creating
it.
project, you have selected web app or quick start.
I have selected web app. For if it is a web app, you have to select web app, and for the web app, it will give you a packaging you want. But if you go to
Oh,
just select a quick start, it will choose your standalone application, and so what it chooses is the packaging category will selected as Java.
yeah, okay.
Okay. So going back to the browsing, so let us browse Spring MVC. Okay. Spring Web MVC, here is the version of the library, so which you need to add. What version we are using? 3.2.18. You can also use the latest version, so that is up to you. Okay, let us maintain the consistency of the same libraries. 3.2.18. Okay, I think this is the release version which we are using. Okay, let me copy this. Okay, and I'll try to paste over here. So if you see here, so far in Maven dependencies, you don't have MVC related libraries. So now it should download the MVC specific libraries, and then so it will attach to your project. It will automatically add in the build path. So let me save this. So observe carefully. So it is downloading all the MVC related jar files. So plus web related libraries, and then it is added into the web. See here, it's downloaded perfectly. So Spring Web MVC jar files and web.jar files has been downloaded, then attached here. So that's perfect. Okay, I think that is the pretty much what we need apart from the core module. Okay, you need this. That's it. So related to configuration part, so let me close this. Okay, close this also, and now let us start working on adding the web.xml file, configure your dispatcher solid. So the beauty of STS is you don't need to write the manual way of configuring the what I would say, so the Spring dispatcher solid. So it will automatically give you the dispatcher solid as well. How? I'll try to explain you. First of all, this is the old version of DTD. I don't know why Maven is still using DTD, because we are in the XSD world. So better to try to replace this with the XSD. Let us go to our previous project. I am hoping that I am using XSD rather than DTD. Let us copy from our web.xml XSD. Okay, yeah, here if you see, I am using perfectly XSD. Let me copy these two lines. Let's paste here. This is the old style of usage of DTD. Try to change that. Okay, this is the XSD. So now I changed it to XSD. Hello. I'm sorry. Okay. So now let us. Okay. So now XSD is ready here. The only difference is between the XSD and DTD. The question is came from Pramod. What is the difference between DTD and XSD? I know many of you looks like very completely new and many concepts. So these are all the basic fundamentals. Okay. So, and before we come into the Spring, we should be coming to know all these details. Okay, that's fine. But so the difference between XSD and DTD, the DTD is the old version of writing your XMLs. So when it comes to the latest version of the XMLs or follows the standards called XSD. XSD stands for XML schema definition. DTD stands for document type definition. So DTD is the one which we are writing when there is no concept of the SAX parsers, and so we don't have any concept of defining the namespaces, and then so we were using concept of DTD. So now it is changed completely in XMLs. Okay, so that is what we use as the concept of XSD. Even our entire Spring configurations file will be configured using XSDs only. Okay, so alright, so even you don't need a much detail of the knowledge, but I'm just trying to get to know the awareness of this. Okay, here is the XSD. So here is the what XSD, what I'm referring. Alright, so now let us configure the dispatcher solid here. So if you want to really configure dispatcher solid, so do control space and write a dispatcher. Okay, let me remove that. So let me write, okay, dispatcher solid. So here, if you see a dispatcher solid declaration, if you select automatically, the entire code is going to be generating automatically by this. So the STS. So this feature is only available on STS. Okay. So now let me enable this dispatcher solid declaration. You see here the whole code is automatically generated, so without any writing additional code. Just you can define whatever URL pattern that you want. Suppose I want to write star.htm, so your Spring, the URL pattern is ready for to contact dispatcher solid. So you can give some name here. If you want, you can write dispatcher solid. If you want to write, you can also mention any name. Suppose I want to write something called dispatcher. I don't want to write a full name. I want to simplify dispatcher. Otherwise, if you want to keep it as it is, no problem. Still, it should work. I'm simplifying this. Hello, what happened? Okay, so now here is the context config location where your Spring configuration file is sitting. That's the location that you need to mention. Let us write our Spring configuration file as well. So okay, how do we write hello? Am I not audible? Others please. Sada, I'm not audible?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay,
Yeah, I also.
Okay, that's perfect. All right. So now let us to add, how do we add a Spring configuration file? So it will be added under WebInf folder. So under WebInf, so you can add. Stop. So I will write here Spring configuration file. So even the STS has rights to that feature. You can directly write a Spring configuration file. So just select the bean configuration file. So the moment so that you select here, so let us write Spring config.xml file. Any name you can give. I'm just writing Spring config.xml file. Under a WebInf folder, I want to place this. Let us click on next. And what you need, so beans is enough. Beans XSD. So here is the XSD which I've already showed you some time back. So I'm selecting so XSD and next, so finish it. Spring configuration file is get ready, right? So we want to attach, we want to integrate this Spring configuration file in the dispatcher servlet. As I said, dispatcher servlet is responsible to load Spring configuration file automatically. Just mention slash spring config.xml config.xml file, which we are loading along with your dispatcher servlet. So we are mentioning explicitly where the Spring configuration file is located. So here is the path. I have mentioned the path is where Spring configuration file located. That's it. So that's the complete set of your Spring Spring dispatcher servlet configuration in the Web.xml file. Okay. So next, moving on into, let us write controller class. So this part is done. So moving on into the next part is we need to write a controller. Let us write the controller under SRC main Java. So let me write the controller here. I will use the same name. So welcome controller. Okay. Name, so package which I want to use. com.easylearn is our package. Let us use the super class. Sorry, it's not a super class, super interface. So let us use the interface is controller interface. Let me also add that interface. So interface is controller. So controller from MVC, right? I am selecting that as well. So it should automatically overrides the method in your controller class. Let us do finish it. Perfect. So now controller class has been written. So implements by this, and then it is also overridden the handle request method. Now you have a request as well as the response. Let me change arg0 to request and arg1 to response. Come on. So that is my request object, and so this is our response object. So let us go to write your stuff. I don't want to write any logic as of now, just redirect to the moment the request is received here, we want to redirect it to our JSP page. Let us write a JSP page. So let me write a JSP page under WebInf. I want to add a folder called JSP. Under this JSP, I will place a file called welcome.jsp. So let us select the JSP is what we want. So JSP file. Let me select this. Click on next. The new file name, let us change it to welcome.jsp. Any file name you can mention. I'm just mentioning welcome.jsp. And next, so this is a JSP standard template has been chosen, and click on finish it. So now JSP is also generated perfectly. Now in the controller class, so finally what I want to return here, model and view. Model means whatever the model class is written the data object, plus view means which JSP you want to return. So here is the controller. So this is a full-fledged MVC framework, right? So let us write model and view class, define here. Let us assume at this point we are not connecting to any model, but instead of model, assume that model is written some response, and that is what I will write here. So model and view. So MAV equal to new model and view. And then so MAV dot, if you want you can set views separately and the object separately. So that is your model data, you can set it separately. Suppose I want to set the view. So you can simply use set view name, you can set your view name. So view is located under WebINF folder /WebINF /WebINF /JSP / our file name is welcome.jsp, right? And I want to set the model object also. So mav.set mav.add objects. The add object, so you should set both key as well as value. Okay, so your model objects. So key is name is some, okay, key you can use, like let us say we just only sending the message. The key name is message, and the key value which you want to display here is, so I will write some message, welcome to Spring MVC framework. I'm just trying to display this message back to my client. So return should not be null, return should be your model and view object should be written. That's it. So that's the simplest controller which we are writing at this point. Later we will see the more detailed scope. Done? So now controller is done. So, and we want to read this message, okay, in the JSP, right? So as I said, so you can read this JSP in several ways. One is you can use JSTL expressions, then read it. Suppose if you want to read via JSTL expressions, so simply, so dollar flower braces should be open. You need to pass your key. What is the key name? Is message. That's the, okay, approach number one for reading the data. Okay, approach one for to read the data in JSP. So the second approach is, you can still go to the other approach also. The second approach is, you can still, okay, remember your expressions, okay, JSP standard expressions. So less than, percentile, equal to, then you can use message objects, message attributes, right? Sorry, not message. So from the request object, so request dot, request is an implicit object here. Request dot, there is a method. Get attributes is the method. Moment if you pass your key, it should return the value. So this is a standard elements in JSP, which is converted into a simple line is this. So this is our approach number 2. So hopefully these are all everybody knows, but I'm still trying to showing you. So welcome MVC, some title I have given, that's it. So this is the pretty much what you can write in the JSP at this point, okay, and the controller. So what else? You need to register this controller in the Spring configuration file. Okay, how can we register? So we can register this in Spring configuration file. Let me register. So configuring as a bean. So let us configure as a bean. The bean should be associated with some name tag. So give some name called welcome.htm, some or welcome.do, anything you can give. And then so name of the class which you want to register, name of the controller class. So name of the controller class is welcome controller has been registered. That's it. So this bean will be scanned automatically by handler mapping. Then it will get readily available for you to call. Okay, that's it. So that's the first XML web project. First XML web MVC project. Any questions before we deploy this application into server? Otherwise, maybe let's deploy. Then if you have any questions, you can ask me. So okay, which handler mapping which uses is the default name handler mapping it will uses. It will automatically scans the bean names and then it will uses. default handler mapping. Still it always it runs, it will uses that. Okay, so now let me run this project.
Yeah.
So let me run on server. I'll select Apache Tomcat is the deployment location where we want to deploy. I don't want to deploy these two projects. I want to deploy only MVC project. Let us finish it. So are you sure you want to remove a resource from the server? Yes, I have did that. Then finish it. Now the application is been deploying into the server. Looks like, so there is a port number conflict. So port number 8005 is already been using. Looks like I am already running in my other so Eclipse. Let me stop here because it's already using 8080 port. So let me stop this. Okay, and let me go back here. Now let us run this. Let me deploy it again. So go to run as, run on server. So choose Tomcat, click on next, finish it again. There shouldn't be any port conflicts, hopefully. Yes, perfect. Okay, so looks like so there is an error. So it is unable to identify Spring configuration file. I understand why it is. Okay. So maybe because I have not given a fully qualified path of the JSP. That is the only reason. Okay. Let us mention in Web Dot Xml file including WebINF also, because it is not registering. It is not able to open the file. If you see here, could not open servlet context. So okay, so file not found exception. It means that it is not able to identify Spring configuration file. Let me mention the fully qualified path. So under WebINF of this project, Spring configuration file is setting. Okay, let's save this, stop the existing server and then restart it again, redeploy and then restart it. So choose the server again for to deploy and then so next, finish it. This time perfectly reading. So if you see your handler mapping scanners, I'll try to show you everything. See here, this time a new context object is being constructed. It's not a regular application context, which is an XML web application context. So this is another context container. So entire Spring framework, you have 3 different containers: Bean Factory container, application context container, XML web application context container, or you can also call it as web application context container. Okay, so these are all the various containers. For especially web application, it uses the web application context container. So it again internally uses application context only, web application initializer. So it is using application context. Okay, so if you come down a little bit down here, it is reading the Spring configuration file. But am I written any extra context configuration for to do this? As part of the dispatcher servlet activation, it is automatically loading Spring configuration. And then if you see here, it is okay, it is using the handler mapping. So it is using the bean name URL handler mapping is the default handler mapping. Okay, so it is registering all the handlers of your application which is configured in the Spring configuration file, so which is registering in the handler mapping. So this is the name which you are asking, Pramod. So this is a fully qualified name for handler mapping. And so
Yeah.
how it is identified? So here is the /welcome.html is your handler name, will be registered with associated controller name. That's it. So which means that so everything has been done. So finally your framework servlet, so that is your dispatcher servlet initialization is completed, which means that your Spring framework or your application is up and running without any issues. So server is started successfully and now you can access your application. So how do you access your application? So if you want to access, so this is a welcome page. So just displaying hello world, and you can still use this browser to access that. So if you want to access that controller, so what is the URL which we have given, /welcome.html. Let me copy this and then try to access in the browser. Okay, so I'll paste the one which I copied and then click on enter. So it is successfully executed, and in both the approaches it is being displaying here. Approach number 1, welcome to Spring MVC framework. Approach number 2 is also have the same thing. Let me break the lines, okay, and also display in a big font. Okay, let me try to display. This is in a some kind of big font, so that is my H1 font. Let us display that. Okay, that's it. Now let me save this. Now if I go to refresh, I should expect this to be displayed like this. So make sense? So in both approaches, so you are able to call, and finally your controller is being called. Your controller is okay. So it's been redirecting to your JSP, right? It is definitely going to a controller. From the controller only decided which JSP need to be open. So let me you can still access the same application in your regular browsers like Google Chrome or Internet Explorer. Still you can access over there. Okay, welcome to Spring MVC framework. Any questions from anybody on this application? Any questions so far? Any doubts? Okay, looks like no questions, no doubts. So please practice maybe before we continue. Okay, our next session with annotations. I would like to give a chance to you to practice, so that you can really see a difference between the XML version of the project versus annotation project. So please try to practice this before you attempt in the next session, so that you can see how easy to build MVC application using annotation world. Okay, I'll try to compare both as well. So alright, so that's it I have. Looks like most of you have no questions. Anybody has any questions, please you can ask.
Do we have session tomorrow?
Tomorrow is Saturday, right?
Yeah.
Okay, let us have a session on Saturday, maybe. Okay, so we can off on Sunday. Is that okay to everybody? Let us get
Srinivas, can we get a break for this Saturday and Sunday so that we can practice actually? So that we can ask questions.
So is
Monday
it
will continue again.
Let us see the opinion of others. I don't want to commit myself.
Yeah.
Let's see the opinion of others.
It's I am okay with Ankur's opinion here.
Okay.
Because
I'm also okay with Ankur.
Okay. Okay. Looks like except Amit, looks like everybody is fine. Okay. Then Amit also saying okay. He's also okay. All right. Then sounds good. So let us get a break here. I don't generally like a break, because maybe you may go to other direction which I don't want to be. Okay, so maybe for this week let us plan like that. So coming week onwards, maybe for only one day we can get off on Sundays, and rest other days we will work. Okay, so just to confirming to again everybody, so we don't have a session this Saturday and Sunday. We will be meeting again on Monday. Okay.
Srin, I have one question.
Yes, Pramod, please go ahead.
Yeah. So like in Web Dot XML, we have configured that is given the Spring config dot XML location on that here. Yeah. So if we give the some, I think dispatcher config.xml, it automatically search that and it will do that. How it will load that? So defaultly it's context configuration. If you give the server your config name dispatcher hyphen config.xml, it's automatically load that XML file, and then it's
okay. If you allow me to wait for to do another couple of projects, your question will be answered automatically in the coming sessions. I understand your question, okay, but it will be answered in the upcoming sessions, so you will come to know that.
Okay, yeah, sure. Yeah, thank you.
No problems. All right, so sounds good. So have a good day to all of you, and see you on the next session, and happy weekend. Meet you again on Monday. Bye bye.
Yeah, same to you. Bye.